What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of Time Crunch. I'm lucky to be joined tonight by Dan Pische. Dan is a friend of mine who used to be in the Chicago area and a few years ago relocated to Miami. Dan is a senior VP with First American Bank. He's on their loan committee. He's also on the Trade Finance Advisory Council for the Department of Commerce. It's very interesting. And Dan also kind of moonlights as a emerging beer writer. He's had some of his work featured on Brewbound pretty recently, which is really cool. So Dan is a very active beer enthusiast, trader, all of the above. Dan knows a lot about all the cool breweries in the country. So we always have a lot to talk about when we're able to get together. So Dan, anything I missed there?
Oh, you covered it well. Thanks for having me, Doug.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you coming to talk to us. So Dan had reached out to me, I think it was about a week ago, and to see if I had heard about the new loans that were being made available through the SBA to, among other places, breweries. And so I had just, read a little bit about it, was familiar with the idea of it, but I, suggested to Dan, hey, instead of you, talking to me on the phone, how about we kind of make this a Time Crunch episode?
Perfect.
So, probably a lot has changed even just since we first started talking a week ago. Every day, it's this thing is evolving, and all the relief that's coming our way is we're getting a little bit more clarity as we go. But you want to start with the disaster relief options that came out about a week ago?
Sure.
Tell us like kind of what they are and
I'd say the main one on a national level is issued through the Small Business Administration, the SBA. It's their Economic Disaster Loan Program. Originally, this program was conceived for kind of natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, repurposed into an economic disaster as a result of COVID-19 and deployed on a national basis. So effectively provides liquidity to businesses based on operating margin, so revenue minus cost of goods sold, your gross margin from the previous tax year. And it's been at least in the early days, a good option for many businesses who are seeking a source of liquidity. Applications are open nationwide, and a lot of businesses are taking advantage of that. Now, you alluded to some of the changes. We stand here after the Senate bill of the stimulus has been passed, and it's waiting going to the House likely the next day or so. So there are some additional programs coming. In addition, many states and local markets, localities have other relief programs available to businesses. So depending on where you're at, depending on your individual needs, you have options that are both available at the federal level and then at state and potentially local levels as well.
Okay. What does it take to be eligible for the SBA loans?
There's a number of qualifications available, but many businesses who are operational really do qualify. It is a pretty wide-ranging program. So I would say that most businesses in operation that have a workable gross margin, I think, is kind of the biggest factor to it. If you're a distributor or wholesaler, it can be a little challenging just because of your slim margin. But I think it's really well suited for covering payroll expenses and some of the other costs that are being incurred while many businesses are shut down right now. So there's a lot of information available online. Always recommend going direct to the source because the program has changed even in the last 48 hours. They reduced the amount of forms you have to fill out just because of the volume they're getting. So constantly evolving program, new details coming. So you can check out that on the SBA's website. Pretty easy to find.
What's like the range of funds that are available per business?
It goes up to 2 million is the top line. I was on a lender call with the SBA about a week ago. They mentioned that for loans of $500,000 and below, relatively formulaic. It's just half of the previous 12-month period of gross margin. So easy to
That's
calculate.
significant. That's
Yes.
significant. I mean, I work at a pretty big brewery, and even just a $500,000 cushion to play with, that can get you a long way. So
Yes.
that's good to hear. And then the interest rate is pretty fair nowadays too, right? Is it?
Yeah, it's fixed at 3.25. It's the prime rate currently, and loan duration can be as much as 30 years. I think what they're doing is giving 12 months of kind of relief and no payments, and then a tapered amortization would kick in depending on the business and their cash position. Realistically, this loan shouldn't be outstanding for 30 years. It's one of those loans that you should be looking to pay back at a reasonable pace, but they wanted to provide ample flexibility, and I credit them for that.
Is that up to the business to determine the length?
It's part of the underwriting process. We haven't actually, because it's a relatively new program, we haven't actually seen anybody have their actual amortization set as of yet. So
got it. Okay, and then like what would you say is you kind of hit on it a little bit already, but with gross margin, but like who would you advise to consider, like to describe an ideal brewery to take this on that would actually need it versus a situation where this is not a good idea for a brewery? Like,
well, I would preface it by saying this is a loan. This is not, and I normally wouldn't delineate that way, but because some of the stimulus provisions that are coming out actually have some forgiveness components, this is a loan. It's basically a form of working capital. It needs to be repaid. So with that, it really comes down to companies and breweries, businesses who are curious and kind of concerned about their liquidity position. Maybe have some flexibility in their timeline. So it's not like you need the loan right now, because you have to go through underwriting. There's a delay until funds are dispersed. You're looking at least 30 days. So this isn't a desperation move, but rather something that, is positioning. We don't know how long the current process is going to go on for, and we don't know what the recovery is going to look like. So having additional funds on hand is advisable for most businesses if you don't already have it. And worst case scenario, you incur some cost, you spend time applying, which is a cost. Then you incur some expenses by the way of interest, and you pay it back, and you had your lifeline if you needed it, and you didn't, you pay it back that way. So I'd say businesses that have been growing and expanding their payroll, and if you think that most companies, will grow relatively, in kind of a straight line, that their expenses really step up because every new employee they add, they immediately incur all of those costs. So think of the breweries that have been growing in the last couple of years, adding more personnel, maybe adding some self-distro. Those are there's a lot of costs associated with that. And this is really, these programs are really designed to help with payroll, because that's the whole thing. They don't want to, you've seen a massive spike in unemployment filings this week. That's what a lot of these programs are trying to abate.
Yeah. And you work with a good number of breweries and also talk to prospective ones. I know you work with non-breweries as well, but can you give us any sense, just in general, from who you've talked to? Like, have you felt like there's a decent amount of interest in these in the SBA loans from folks you've talked to?
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of my week has been spent with conversations with everybody, ranging from manufacturing associations to our customers and different companies and contacts that we have. There's a lot of uncertainty in the economy right now, and liquidity is one of those things that no one ever regretted having in a crisis. So I think everybody's wise to consider it, and every business is a little bit different. Every brewery is, every manufacturer is, and I think you need to take an honest assessment of where your capital and cash position is. The reason I think it's particularly well suited for breweries is that it's, by and large, breweries don't typically maintain large credit lines. Just the nature of their business, whether it's the own premise or even those who have distribution, paid relatively quickly. Is some companies can have longer pay cycles, which would lend themselves to a larger credit line to warehouse those orders. A lot of companies don't have access to that available working capital, and that this is one of the ways of supplementing that potential.
Can it, if the brewery was interested, can they get it as set up as a line of credit where if they wanted $500,000 but didn't need it all, right away, they have to take the whole thing on right away?
It's an amortizing term loan. You can determine how much you want. It does advance. That's to the best of my knowledge. Again, the situation has changed probably in the last week since I emailed you. So, but that's my understanding. It is a term loan. It's meant to amortize.
Gotcha. All right. Well, cool. Well, let's switch to the little bit that we do know about the big stimulus package that's getting ready to roll out. Still pending approval from the House. Is that right?
Correct.
And what do you know about what kind of potential this could have? I know it's we talked before. You'd have to paint a pretty broad stroke on this, but anything you do know that you could share?
Sure. There's a couple pieces to it. We sit here with I'm going to pull up my notes actually just while we're talking. We sit here with it basically going through the House, or I'm sorry, going through the Senate, needing to go through the House, needs to get signed. Those should be relatively quick, and then the rules actually have to be written, which is another piece to take into consideration. Is that it's one thing for the bill to be passed, it's another thing for the rules to be written as to how banks will use it. Largely geared towards payroll and overhead expenses. So healthcare, utilities, interest on some debt that was already in place as of mid-February. There's some formulas that appear, at least in the Senate bill, based on a trailing 12-month, 2.5 times on a trailing 12-month average of monthly payroll cost, the lesser of 2.5 times, or a cap of 10 million. So this is a distribution of stimulus. Basically, there are some forgivable components to it. One of the most notable events is that under some of these COVID programs, that the forgiveness of debt doesn't create a taxable event. So you don't need to pay income on the piece that gets forgiven. A lot of details to come out, and a lot more to come out over the next week, as again, we've only seen one half of it. Even since this got passed, it somehow increased by $200 billion, which it was 1.6, then it was 1.8, then it was 2, and now it's 2.2. So we'll see where it ends up when it gets across the finish line. But largely geared towards payroll. That seems to be the central theme. There's some limitations in there for what are probably deemed probably more highly compensated individuals, but definitely a program that most businesses should be looking at. I think one of the important things to stress is Treasury Secretary Mnuchin pointed to it today in a conference, and banks are feeling it right now, is that whether it's the disaster program, whether it's the after effect of the current COVID situation, or this program, is that the banking system, the lending system, is working to modify huge swaths of their portfolio. We'll be getting an absolute onset of applications as businesses are looking for this. It's a relatively wide window as to when the loan can be obtained, so there is some time, but patience will be something that's important, because with the capacity of banks is shifting. I mean, this is turning on a dime in terms of what certain lenders are trying to set up, and it'll take some time to get there. I do believe that the best place to go is with your current bank, current lender. So when you have a relationship as a starting point, everybody's probably turning their attention inward. It's probably safe to say, and not to say other options won't become available, but as a starting point, that's got to be the best place to go.
Got it. Cool. Well, thanks, Dan. Anything else to add before we play a little time crunch?
No, I think we covered it. The scale of this is obviously being felt everywhere. It's hard to come across somebody who isn't affected. I don't know if you could, and that's putting a lot of strain on everybody and on the system. And there's a lot of ingenuity. I think we were talking about some of the breweries down here in Miami, and I've seen in Chicago and elsewhere doing curbside pickup and home delivery, and it's one of the things I enjoy about the industry is its ingenuity.
I would guarantee that there's some breweries selling a lot more beer right now out their front door than they were before this happened. So you wonder how much of this, as long as the flexibility in the laws that has been granted, at least here in Illinois, you wonder if those will stick around past this, and if they do, what kind of disruption that's going to be on the way things used to be. I heard somebody refer to it as, will they be able to put the toothpaste back in the tube?
It's hard to.
Yeah.
So my hope is that you kind of realize some of the arbitrary nature of some of these laws, and I'm not a lawmaker, but my hope is that a lot of the refinements and improvements stick.
Yeah, it's like, on one hand, everybody's getting very, very used to delivery, which plays into Amazon's big hands. But at the same time, all these small businesses are getting into delivery, and people are able to support a small business and get the convenience of having it show up at their door the same day, which just wasn't an option to us. So I don't know who that's good for. Maybe it's good for both, and somebody in between will be the one that loses out. But I don't know.
Yeah, I hope everybody remembers, the independent retailers and companies, restaurants, coffee shops, etc., because a lot of them aren't, there's going to be some challenges, and a lot of people aren't, frankly, going to be able to open after this. And the hope is that if you want these companies in your neighborhood, and support them. And I think this is a paradigm shift in a lot of ways, and will be, and that's one of the positives, I guess, if we're looking for some positives that hopefully will come out of it.
Yep. Amen. All right, Dan. Well, let's give this a go. So I'm going to actually I normally put 2 minutes on the clock. I'm going to add 10 more seconds to cover the little bit of delay from when you'll actually hear my question. We're going to go 2 minutes and.
This social distancing at its finest. We're about 1,200 miles away.
Exactly. So I've got a list of questions here. You're going to answer as many as you can in 2 minutes. Part of the game is on me to get these out to you as quickly as I can and not stumble.
All right.
There's no such thing as a wrong answer, as long as it's a good faith answer to the question. You're not allowed to ask any follow-ups. So you just kind of, unless you didn't hear me, I can repeat it. You can pass. And but otherwise, just take your best stab at what you think I mean by the question. They're pretty straightforward.
Okay.
All right.
Here we go.
Here we go. So the clock will start when I finish the first question.
All right.
What is the biggest whale you plan to open during your social distancing?
Assassin.
What year-round or seasonal Chicago beer do you wish you had in Florida?
Rev Pills, actually.
What Florida tap room are you most likely to bring your kids to under normal circumstances?
Three Sons.
Name a less talked about streaming or on-demand show that people should check out.
Tiger King. Started watching that yesterday.
Favorite beer podcast?
It's got to be the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Best shelf beer in Florida?
Some German Pilsner.
Don't want to be more specific?
Nah.
Okay. What economic stimulus are you most rooting for right now?
The current the stimulus that's pending. I think it's the most wide-reaching.
Estimate how many bottles are in your beer cellar.
450.
What is the first brewery that comes to mind when I say trade value?
Angry Chair.
Most underappreciated Florida brewery?
That's a good question. Unseen Creatures.
Name a brewery whose stock has been rising off the charts lately.
Side Project.
What's your go-to source for the latest happenings in beer?
I really listen to the Insiders Roundtable. That's where I get a lot of it.
Name a skill tied to your beer interest that you want to improve at.
Podcasting.
Amen. Style most poised for a comeback with beer traders.
Non-adjuncted stouts.
What beer are you most ISO at the moment? We're out of time.
I was not expecting this to go down that route.
I cater to my guests.
Here I was thinking it was about, lending and prudent business practices.
No, we gotta keep it a little more fun. So, do you want to answer that one, even though it won't count toward your score?
Which one was it?
What beer are you most ISO at the moment?
Black Magic from Voodoo. That's my jam.
Very cool. All right, Dan. Well, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. It's going to be fun to follow all this help that's hopefully coming toward breweries and all kinds of other small businesses' way through these stimulus packages. So look forward to keeping in touch with you. And again, thank you.
Absolutely. Take care.
All the best to your family.
Likewise. Thank you.
Cheers, Dan.